The loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a change now! Hey guys, MasakoX here. Now don't let that title fool you. We are not about to dunk on the likes of Goku here. I mean, there's not an Android 16 in sight for that anyway. Far from it. We think that these characters are quite impactful to the series proper, because they have managed to achieve something which is intrinsic for them, constantly evolving within the show's history. Even if the evolution that we have witnessed wasn't the smoothest, nor the most desirable in some cases that we could have gotten, that is of course the art of losing. Art of losing, Masako? You don't just deliberately try to lose something unless you want to get out of something, right? Well, yes, you are true there. But by being a good loser, you may end up with having learnt more than what you may have gotten than if you were a bad winner. You know, we often tend to get annoyed about some things within the world of Dragon Ball as of late. Either that is down to nostalgia, not looking so rosy these days, or whether it is that these days, Dragon Ball is mostly about Goku and or Vegeta. Although the recent chapters in the manga have indeed taken certain measures to try and counter this overly familiar trope, unfortunately the legacy of several years, if not decades, of this trope being in the show will have a very lasting impression with long-term fans, as well as anybody who even has a passing knowledge of the series. They know about Goku or Vegeta from what they may have heard from memes, games, that one episode they just happened to catch on TV because they were bored. That's all they may know, and what they may just only want to grasp. And while it is very much the case, it would be ultimately unfair to say that Goku wins all of his fights, especially in Super. In fact, it would actually be quite inaccurate. Goku hasn't won as many times as you might have thought. In actuality, the only villain or antagonist that he truly defeated alone, without any help, was that of Golden Frieza. And even that was with the help of Whis and Vegeta in some way softening him up before he did the deed. Jiren in the anime doesn't count. He was a joint effort of Goku, Frieza and 17, so sadly you can't count that particular tussle into this discussion. Well, I mean, not really. Also in the original run, taking into account the likes of the first Dragon Ball series and Dragon Ball Z, his victims are only King Piccolo and Kid Buu directly. Everything else was either near misses or ones where he didn't quite deal the final blow. And while it would be unfair to say that his encounter with Frieza didn't count towards his tally, it was indeed future Trunks who dealt the final blow there. When you look to the losses with the Ginyu Force in particular, you think Goku defeated them, especially Raccoon, but it was actually Vegeta to do the ultimate womp for good. Vegeta was pretty ruthless with those guys. Of course, in the world of Dragon Ball, you don't need to down the enemy to win, technically. In fact, you don't need to actually win. It all ties back to what I was just talking about earlier regarding the art of losing, and why some characters are the true winners overall, despite not seeming that way on first glance. Our characters who won their matches didn't really gain much from their victory aside from the knowledge of a job well done. Sure, they got the satisfaction from beating the villain or their opponent down, but in the end, that's not quite as exciting or satisfying in the grander scale of the series. It's when you look to the contrary happening when you start to think about something else. Some characters actually gained more from whenever they encountered losses than when they managed to secure a victory. In fact, most of the character development we have in the entirety of Dragon Ball can be attributed to those losses. It's through adversity that most heroes flourish, and in the shonen genre, time and time again, a character losing and then pushing forward to ensure progression is a pretty major staple. It's everywhere. It's why One Punch Man is so enthralling. The premise of that show is that the guy constantly wins his battles, and yet he doesn't feel happy about it. Saitama was at his most fulfilled during his training, when he was at his lowest ebb and needed to prove to himself and to the world that he could be a hero if he trained hard enough, and his own personal benefit, of course. That was much more rewarding to him, but when he actually got what he wanted, he got stuck in a major rut, and it's the butt of the show, really. Goku didn't really excel until he understood the discipline and importance of martial arts, and the fact that he will lose quite a lot of the time, And when we saw him lose, especially in the early days, the guy came back from that stronger than ever, looking more formidable than he did before the loss. In fact, if you're viewers of the channel, you may probably know that we've been trying to toy with that concept already in our what if of what if Goku defeated Master Roshi. It's the subject of that, if Goku won against Jackie Chun in the first martial arts tournament that he took part in. 5 parts strong, and it paints a very different Goku to what we have now. Through sheer stubbornness and pomposity, he's basically lost all of his friends that he'd gotten prior to winning that first encounter. This lesson that our protagonist got from his mentor, Master Roshi in disguise of course, was in fact one of the most important elements of his overall story. Without it, as we talked about, he would be nothing like the heroic persona that we have all come to expect from Goku, despite his mostly naive mood. During the initial stages of his adventures, he developed a lot. I mean, he had to, because if he didn't, then the manga may have been cancelled after the Pilaf arc, and that's a true story. If you actually look back to the first saga of Dragon Ball, Goku looks a little bland. He doesn't really progress or change in any way. Bulma and Yamcha do. I mean, even Oolong does, kind of, in the fact that he doesn't run away this time, whereas before the series, he might have done. Goku here just exists. Losing against such opponents as Ten Shinhan or Mercenary Tao, as well as the aforementioned wig-wearing Roshi, were pretty crucial in shaping his desire in choosing to fight stronger guys, of always wanting to challenge himself, and also, as well as inadvertently, instigating the Tournament of Power decades before it actually occurred. The guy just wanted to find stronger opponents than himself and then put the jeopardy of the universes into question. Yeah, Goku, you might want to take that whole thing down a notch or several nowadays. But that's not all. When Krillin got tambourined, Goku felt this as his own personal failure to protect his friend. In a way, that action could have counted as a personal loss to Goku, in that he then decided to be determined and strive forward to avenge his friend. This thought experiment later came back into consideration during the Frieza saga. In fact, with the same 2 people being called into question, as well as the addition of Frieza, which has led us to the most important transformation of the series, the Super Saiyan. Without it, could you honestly imagine Dragon Ball being as globally iconic? Probably not, but that's for another video. On top of all of this, Goku's desire to protect his friends became one of his major traits, as well as bettering himself most effectively through defeat. And even though the Tournament of Power seriously tried to shoehorn in that one, it still was very much in line with his overall personality. Despite the confusing moments within that entire arc, it did tick the boxes for Goku's typical plot points, albeit very clumsily. Now, if only we could have had less of the more silly and selfish moments which seriously jarred our perception of Goku in just one series. I mean, a lot. Like we've said many times, Super was not perfect. Finally, Goku had lost another thing that wasn't a battle. He lost perspective until he managed to counter it during the Cell games. He managed to gain the realization that he put too much on Gohan's shoulders and did not really respect his son's individual wishes or worries, and that then brought us one of the most memorable and really emotional Goku moments that didn't involve fighting. He had simply let training with his son get the better of him, and he hadn't really asked Gohan what he thought of the whole thing. It was up to the little guy to try and muster his way through his father's passion. In fact, you could say that Gohan's loss of his father then made him steel up and eschew any idea of mercy against Cell, and ultimately securing the win for himself. So in a way, major losses throughout the course of his growing up allow Goku to develop as a character better than if he had just been either winning all the time or if he had a majority of victories. The illusion that he wins all the time is a very unfair one, because Goku's power, he isn't impervious, but he is not alone over there. Think about Piccolo Jr. for a second here as well. How different would he have been if he won against Goku in the last episodes of the first Dragon Ball series? Or, for example, if he did not sacrifice himself in order to save Gohan? Those were key moments for him, and without them, we would have seen a much more surly and malicious Piccolo. Hardly a worthy holder of the name Mr. Piccolo, or Picoyo if you're Pan. Sure, he had the potential to redeem himself from the very start, sparing various humans he came into contact with as a baby Namekian, and then later on, but it's those losses in his juvenile years which started him on his route to redemption to where we see him today. These days we hardly remember the truly evil Piccolo, unless we are reminded of him deliberately in some kind of video we are shared with, or if it's brought up in a certain chunk of dialogue or flashback. He's become so integral for our heroes. He had become such an important part of the Dragon Team that we don't even think on how much we owe to that due to his, well, failures. Vegeta is an even better example of this. It is easy to say that the Prince's original encounter with Goku was able to set him on his route to redemption. It was a long and rocky one, probably one of the longest ones of any character in any shonen series, arguably. Still though, we would wish to argue that the one that really started a true change within Vegeta was his loss to perfect Cell, one that really broke him. Through that entire encounter, he lost a lot of things. All of this was down to him. It was all his own fault, which later resulted in Cell obliterating Trunks, showing Vegeta out to be an absolute arrogant fool and losing his most important yardstick in the form of Kakarot. Something that unexpectedly touched Vegeta's core. And of course, you can argue that the whole Majin Vegeta moment kind of overrides that realization. But in the end, it was Vegeta's newfound love and care for his family that made him sacrifice, made him choose to lose. If he hadn't felt the loss of Trunks in the first place, who knows how everything else after that would have ended? How his relationship with his family would look? But thanks to the bond that he formed with future Trunks, even if it was a bit strange and a bit weird, he truly felt the need of protecting his son from his actual timeline shine through, without having the need to try and force it. And let's not forget Bra here, whom he's now fully acknowledged and accepted as his child from the day she was born, or magically birthed. Thanks, Whis. And if you think about it, even Frieza's learnt from his failures. You can watch this video I did a couple of weeks back for more on that chestnut. His journey has made him realise two things. One, immortality isn't really that fun, especially having been given effectively eternal existence around bears and fairies and pixies. And second, he really likes fighting now and admires the martial craftsmanship. And while Broly was mopping the floor with him, Frieza was in awe of his power. He desired to have him on his side and didn't see him as one of the filthy monkeys that he hated for so long, but rather as a powerful weapon that he could make use of. He has matured a lot and has begun to act a lot more like his father, who saw the true value of Saiyans to his cause and capitalized on it. Who would have thought that this would have been an occurrence of the like father, like son motif here? Losing made him change his grip on reality around him, and he was able to loosen up around his troops, which would be a welcome change in the Frieza Force. Make no mistake, however, he's still a mostly arrogant and self-centered jerk who isn't going to become a full-on member of the Dragon Team, but at the same time, he has certainly become a different kind of jerk. It is funny to make this video when paired with the one that we did about Gohan turning into a total Chad these days too, as he seems to be the one who's actually losing while winning. All his victories put him into a false sense of security, which causes our poor Chad Han to know his place like the rest of them, and wait for Goku and Vegeta. But I think that Gohan has taken on one of his most admirable traits, fighting against all odds for someone else, and that one was started by Krillin. That's right. Krillin is the most frequent butt of the lose streak joke. Even bigger than Yamcha, I know. And yes, I know it's shocking, but it's true. But even when he is severely outclassed, he is ready to help regardless, and that does not change. He has moments of doubt, sure, but when his friends need him, he is always there, and losing only makes his will even stronger. Toriyama was never very good with morals and lessons, but that one was a very simple one that even he could convey to us. That it's okay to fail as long as we learn from our mistakes. Good is good enough. It's a pretty good moral, actually. Something that transcends cultural differences and boundaries and was pretty universal for young people around the world. Maybe that's why it makes the Dragon Ball cast mostly likable. Not the powers, not the screaming, but the feeling that through their failures we can relate to them and learn with them. Okay, maybe the powers a little bit. Though having said that, we wouldn't say no to Gohan or Krillin winning something meaningful for a change. So what do you guys think? Do you feel that Goku is the biggest loser? Who do you think has benefited the most from defeats and hardship? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going, and I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!